Folks, we are running this as a live stream. Now, the audience mostly is
I see the content of this meeting is being sent to a third party. Hopefully, this means that it is being
sent to YouTube.
I see the content of this meeting is being hopefully it is broadcasted on YouTube already.
It's being sent to YouTube. Now the problem we have here is what we were hoping to avoid because we are zooming. Now the problem we have here is what we were hoping to avoid because we are zooming. And we're also live streaming on YouTube. So we're getting the YouTube feed as well.
Okay, so
I'm going to go in and do a welcome.
Okay.
And then I will keep quiet. The only voice is going to be you, Alice. And hopefully we can mute some sound and have only one Alies Biely.
By turning off the sound.
Yes, that's what I'm talking about. I'm just going to mute that. So, Alice, we're going to welcome everybody now. It's the 1st of February 2005. We are here at Marian House in North Finchley, where we're about to hear a presentation. Trying to get myself lined up here to be seen with a bit of delay. I'm the chair, I'm Dr. Alan Flowers, chair of the Anglo Belarusian Society. And we have here a fantastic audience. There's going to be about 20-25 people during the presentation live. We also have a number of people joining us from as far afield as Canada. And also Novogrodok. There is a visitor online from Novogrodok.
Minsk, I have seen some people from Minsk and
Belarus, and even some of Alice's friends from Minsk. So greetings to everybody online. Could somebody online
how many people are there in Finchley?
Say a quick hello?
Boston, Massachusetts.
Do you see the people online, Alice?
Yes.
Could you ask them to say hello to us? Because we're seeing you, we're seeing Alan Flowers on the stream, but we're not seeing anybody else. Could one of them just say...
We're here and we can hear you just fine.
That's great. Where's Novogrodok? Could you say hello to us? Tamara.
Novogrodok, hello to everybody. Novogrodok is in Belarus, and it's the first capital of Belarus, of the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, in fact, from the 13th century.
Sorry, it was the way I put it. When I said, where is it? We were meant in terms of the Zoom. We didn't see you. I think everybody here knows where Novogrodok is. That's a nice introduction, though. Thank you, Tamara, and thank you. Is there anybody from Minsk? Minsk.
Yes. Hello. Hello.
Yeah, where's your video? Put your video on. We'd like to see you.
Oh. Minsk. Hello.
This is Minsk in the car.
Oh,
that's
yeah.
Lovely. Fantastic. We are fine. Right. At this point, we're going to pass the floor and we'll all go on to mute. If everybody could please mute. I'm going to mute as well so we get no sound interference for Sasha's presentation. And I can't seem to mute. I don't know where my Zoom is.
Right, so hopefully I may start.
So we'll now pass over for the presentation, the very Tzimmes, and I think almost all of us, if we didn't already know, we're going to learn what Tzimmes is, kugel, knishes, krupnik, and other delicacies. There is one delicacy, a soup is in preparation at this very moment, which we'll all be able to enjoy. And Alona's coming along a little later also, and we'll be sampling a couple of other dishes. We'll hear about these from Alies. So, over to you, Alies, and I will try and
Yes.
mute my.
Okay, if I may start, I do. I'm Alexander Biely from actually at this moment from Bat Yam. I'm a recent or rather recent political immigrant from Belarus. I had to escape my country 3 years ago as a result of ruthless oppression of anything that is alive in Belarus, and I now live in Israel. I'm also an Israeli citizen, but for more than 30 years I've been a Belarusian historian. Before the immigration, actually specialized in several fields of knowledge, but my main interest for many years has been the history of material culture, and particularly food history. I am an author of more than 10 books on the topic, and my last book published last year in Krakow is called Sami Tzimmes in Belarusian, or The Very Tzimmes, shall we translate it this way into English. And this is a pansa, it's a play of words, because the Tzimmes in the literal meaning of the word is one of the signature. Tzimmes in literal meaning of the word is one of the Ashkenazi signature dishes. Usually it's carrot stew or other vegetable stew, served as a dessert because it's usually sweet, but there are other versions of tzimmes as well, and I believe that today you will be tasting the one with meat, with turkey, as I have heard. But for most Ashkenazi communities in Eastern Europe, tzimmes was considered one of the most tasty dishes, and people with whom Jews shared the common living space, so to say, particularly Jews of Belarus and Lithuania, picked up that for this great symbolic meaning of this dish. And the word penetrated Belarusian, Russian, Ukrainian, Polish languages as well, but it changed meaning, and it became to mean either something most tasty or, generally speaking, something most important, the very essence of something. And this is why I have given this name to my book, because it tells the stories of those dishes that were roughly equally similar both to Jews of Lithuania and Belarus and to Belarusians themselves. So it may be called the most unusual book about the Jewish cuisine in the world, because it's to the same extent, or almost to the same extent, it's also a book about Belarusian cuisine. So I tell the story of this selection of dishes. There are 14 chapters in the book, and we will briefly go through most of them. And I hope you will get a brief impression of in which way Jewish cuisine, I mean Ashkenazi Jewish cuisine, especially Litvak cuisine, we will be mostly talking about Litvak cuisine, is similar to Belarusian and Lithuanian cuisine, and where they are different. Of course, there are far more dishes in Belarusian cuisine and in Jewish cuisine, especially if we talk about Jewish festive cuisine. But we are mostly concentrated upon intersection. Some of these dishes were brought by the Jews from the places that they lived before, like in Poland, like on the border of today's France and Germany, where Yiddish language and Yiddish cuisine emerged some 700 years ago, maybe more. But some dishes were borrowed by the Jews in Belarus and Lithuania, and some of them even were carried by them across the ocean and made an international career, so to say. Right. Litvak cuisine. There are quite a number of books on Litvak cuisine. I have selected several of them for this slide. The one is called The Taste of South Africa. What it has in common with Lithuania and Belarus. The reason is that Jewish community of South Africa is unique because it's the only in the world which about 90% consists of the descendants of Litvak Jews. That means Jews from today's Lithuanian Republic and from the northwest of Belarus, which is also a historical Lithuania, including Novogrudek, from which Tamara is watching us. And because in South Africa were almost only Litvak Jews, they, in a way, they better than many others preserved this original Litvak cuisine. But oddly enough, it was also influenced by local South African Aboriginal culinary tradition as well. Another slide is one important person that I think some of them should remember the name, Fanny Levando, a unique person. She was running a vegetarian Jewish restaurant in Vilnius before the World War II, and because in a way Vilna was the capital of Yiddish language. It was the headquarters of the famous YIVO Institute, the Institute for the Study and Promotion of Yiddish Language and Culture. And the standard of literary Yiddish language is based upon Litvak dialect. So in the mid-war period, there were many guests from all over the world into Vilnius, Jews who, not Zionists, but the lovers of Yiddishkeit, of the Yiddish culture of in particular Lithuanian Belarus, of today's, what we today know as Belarus. And they were all the guests of this famous Fanny Levando's restaurant, including Albert Einstein, for instance, and many others. And she wrote a book, the Vilna Vegetarian Cookbook, which also contains a lot of recipes from Lithuanian Belarus cuisine, vegetarian recipes, but from books like Lithuanian Cookbook by Vincenta Zavadska. I'm telling you to show that many dishes that were perceived as Jewish, they had local roots, in fact. Unfortunately, Fanny Levando perished as a result of Holocaust in Vilnius. Together with her family, she was killed in Panari mass massacre site. This is to give you a general insight into the background. And now we go into first in this series of dishes that we're going to talk about krupnik. Krupnik is soup from groats, usually barley. This is most frequent base for soup. But not also barley. It may be made with other groats as well. But barley is I think in 80 or 90% of the case. This was the base of the menu, both for Jews of Lithuania and Belarus, for Lithuanians, for Belarusians, for Poles, because this is some food historians speculate that perhaps krupnik and similar soups were the most ancient dishes in the culinary history of mankind that perhaps were invented, I don't know, 15,000 years ago or something like this, well before the true history of civilization started. Because the very idea of boiling grain in water is very simple, very basic, and once people started to master fire, use it for their purposes, maybe quick enough after this they learned how to boil this soup, and there are many legends and fairy tales or proverbs about krupnik. I quote a couple of Jewish anecdotes about this soup already recorded in Northern America. One like one about certain Jew who is every week is coming to a famous New York restaurant and orders krupnik, and waiters are already accustomed to this habit, and every time that he comes, they immediately, without asking anything, bring his krupnik. But one particular day after this routine procedure, this client looks to the waiter with waiting expression, and he cannot understand what's the problem, and he asks, "Why you always were ordering krupnik? Do you want me to bring something else?" "No, I want you to taste this krupnik." "But what's wrong with it? You haven't tasted it yourself. Why do you think something's wrong?" "No, I want you to sit and taste this krupnik." "But where is the spoon, namely?" And there's a couple of others like this. Right. In my book, I also much I'm writing not only about Jewish side, as I told you, but there is one example that Poles, for instance, in particular the American Poles, they even produce concentrated krupnik in the United States, and I regret very much that Belarusians, given this scale of destruction of Belarusian culture in Belarus, they almost forgotten the word itself. Do I have this slide? Yes. Here on the right side, you see the concentrate produced by Litcon factory in Belarus. They do not know the word krupnik, and they call it superlovo грибной, не требующий варки. Soup of barley with mushroom, not requiring cooking. This simply to give you an idea of how deep the traditional culture is destroyed in Belarus, that I think perhaps 90% of today's Belarusian would not recognize what the very word krupnik means. And this is to illustrate Belarusian proverb, крупина за крупиной гоняется с дубиной. Meaning that in poor families, the krupnik was so rare that one, how to call it, grain had to look for another grain. Yes, and now the next dish, zatyrka. In Yiddish, it could be also zatyrka, but original Yiddish word is farfelach. And it was another most popular soup. And I believe that today you will have a chance to taste it if everything goes well. I'm not responsible for this, my warning, because people on site are providing the tasting part of today's event. But zatyrka is a soup usually with milk, but not necessary. It may use also meat stock or just water, plain water. Soup made with small flour dumplings. These flour dumplings may be made directly before the preparation of the soup itself, or they may be stored in advance. They may be prepared as a kind of pasta or macaroni and stored in advance, which usually happen 2 days, because today food industry in many countries make this farfel or zatyrka in Polish. Not in Belarus, unfortunately. This is why one of the reasons, because the word is getting out of use, was the word, as in case of krupnik, and the dish itself. Although some 30-40 years ago, it was very, very popular in Belarus, especially given that the well-being of today's the citizens of the USSR, of Belarusian Socialist Republic, was not as high as today. And zatyrka also was one of the significant signature dishes, both for Belarusians, for Poles, for Lithuanians, for Jews, of course. The very word zatirat means to wrap, because you have to wrap duff in your hands, and these clumps of duff fall from your hands into the boiling water, and that's how zatyrka could be prepared the quickest way. In Belarusian literature, there's a famous short story which is called 5 Spoons of Zatyrka, which has been written by a Belarusian writer of Jewish origin, Dmitrok Bedulia, who was in fact Shmuel Plavnik, his true name. Dmitrok Bedulia was his pen name. And it tells a very sad story about the family who managed somehow to find the last, I don't know, maybe a pound or something of flour, and everybody was very hungry, but they managed to cook zatirka. But then a greedy female neighbor came and without permission ate 5 spoons of zatirka, and this was the biggest tragedy for this family. And I believe even now, after 100 years, this story is still in the program of Belarusian literature in school. But it also because this poverty, when zatirka was the last chance for survival, was equally known to Belarusians and Jews 100 years ago and more. And according to the diaries of survived Minsk ghetto prisoners, for instance, they also remember that wherever ghetto prisoners were able to smuggle some flour from outside world into ghetto, the most natural way to use the flour for them was to prepare zatirka. So if today's chefs in your kitchen manage to cook it and you will be eaten, please remember about the victims of Minsk ghetto, of many other ghettos, especially that only several days ago we had Holocaust Remembrance Day, and perhaps
Alies, I'm going to come in because here's our Alexander Kaziak, who is working upstairs at the moment, and his biggest problem was to decide on how big the dough balls should be. And he started small, and then Father Sergei decided they should be a bit larger. So we really are in preparation, and we will be sampling.
Okay.
And where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Here we are. Maybe we need your advice, Alice. How he's really worried about the size of his.
I think it's quite normal.
Yeah, but there's two sizes. There's two sizes there, small ones and big ones. He wasn't sure.
I would opt for bigger ones, me personally.
Yeah,
but
that's what he's now doing.
It will be anyway soaked in hot milk, water, and well. And so I suggest you to remember those people, most of whom didn't manage to survive Holocaust, for whom this dish was the last chance of survival, not so long ago, some 80 years ago. Jewish version of zatirka sometimes, in the simplest way, was made of broken matzo, and such kind of zatirka was called usually matzfarfa, of the word farfel. And oddly enough, one funny coincidence that I quote in my book is that the first ambassador of independent Belarus in Israel, his surname was Mikhail Farfel, zatirka, and after serving his term as an ambassador, he became an Israeli citizen and stayed in Israel. I don't know whether he is alive until now, but also funny story of zatirka in a broad sense. There will be several stories about grated potato dishes in my book, particularly bulbalatki, sudraniki, kishke, and also on kugel. And here I quote several samples of merch from American market, which celebrate Yiddishkeit, tradition of Jewish cuisine, which are, for those who understand this, are also traditions of Belarusian cuisine, although they are not as good advertised. And on an apron on the left, you see the quotation from famous Bulbe song, Freitag Bulbe, Montag Bulbe, telling that the typical menu of, or the typical poor Jew, and maybe 90% of Jew of traditional shtetl were poor, consisted of bulbe 6 days a week, but on Shabbat, as a sign of celebration, they had bulbe kugel. We will talk about bulbe kugel later, and I also believe that you will taste it due to efforts of Alyona Lashenko. Yesterday we had conversation with her. Hopefully this has not disappeared. Grated potato dishes, bulbalatki, so draniki. For Belarusians, draniki, or grated potato, how to call it, fritters, perhaps the most appropriate English word, I consider the most significant, most symbolic dish of Belarusian cuisine. This chapter of my book is the biggest because of the importance of this dish, both for Belarusians and for the Jews. And I have a detailed history of draniki and their relatives all over the world there, including the United States, Germany, and other countries. And it was required for myself because I had to study, to learn how old are draniki in the history of Belarus, because when I started this research, I didn't realize that it is very, very late phenomenon in Belarusian history, because the first recorded first records of the presence of draniki on the territory of Belarus are of early 20th century, not even the late 19th. And from what we know, this dish, as other dishes of grated potato, were brought to the territory of Belarus by the Jews, because most of innkeepers were Jews, and their cooking traditions influenced the Belarusian cuisine, and that's how Belarusians learned to prepare this dish. In modern Jewish world, bulba latkes, or simply latkes, or levivot in Hebrew, are being prepared for Hanukkah, and they have the symbolic meaning of celebrating the miracle with oil, which happened in Jerusalem temple. But in the traditional Ashkenazi cuisine 100 years ago, they were somewhat more frequent. And and especially frequent they were in the cuisine of Soviet Belarusians, because I have a very detailed history of this dish in Belarus and all over the world. The very word draniki also is very recent. It became well spread in Belarus and became an icon of national identity only in 1960s. It was also a surprise for myself because I had a stereotype that they were eternal, the dish itself and the name for it. But it's quite different. And those of you who read Belarusian who are interested may find a very detailed story of it in the book. Another famous grated potato dish of Belarusian cuisine is babka, made of potato, but in Belarus, on the Jewish side of the story, it's more complicated because kugel, or Jewish version of babka, originally could be made from different ingredients, including soft cheese, vegetable, but most typical kugel was made of noodles. I have a separate chapter on noodles in the book because they were also equally important for the Jews and for Belarusians, but surprisingly, it is considered that they were brought to the territory of modern Belarus and Lithuania not by Jews but by Tartars. It's another interesting contribution into this multicultural history of Belarus and Lithuania. For Jews and especially for Hasidim, for Hasidic Jews, Lokshen Kugel was the most sacred dish that they could imagine, and they were almost worshiping it. And this was one of the points of the issues that created a big hostility between true Litvak Jews or Mitnagdim and the Hasidic Jews, because Mitnagdim or Litvaks with their head, famous Gaon of Vilnius, were more rational, more skeptical, and they cannot accept such, as they considered, ludicrous and perhaps profane attitude to a dish which was placed by Hasidic Jews almost to a divine position. And in my book, in general, there are many stories about this division, about Litvaks and Hasidic Jews, in projection to cuisine, but also more generally taking into account the psychological and religious difference between them. And in several other stories of other dishes, we will also see this. But for us, it's also important to know that by the end of 19th century or early 20th century, the Jews, partly owing to poverty, which was a rule for them in this time, they started to switch from noodles to grated potato when making kugel. And it was this version of kugel with grated potatoes that was borrowed by Lithuanians and Belarusians, by Lithuanians with the same name, kugelis, and by Belarusians with the name babka. And another version of kugel, which has a very unique history. The immigrants from Belarus and Lithuania, not even the first Aliyah, which was in the end of 19th century, but much earlier, in the very beginning of 19th century, the disciples of Vilna Gaon settled in the Holy Land, and they've brought their version of Lokshen Kugel, which they slightly modified in what is today Israel, and was by some people called Palestine at those times, and it developed into what is known today as Jerusalem Kugel, but its roots are in Lithuania and Belarus. Kishka. Another dish which may be considered common for Belarusians and Jews, but not fully. The word is definitely the common. It's a kind of starchy potato, starchy sausage. But Belarusian and Jewish kishka are different, because Belarusian kishka is also made of grated potato. It in a way can be called babka or kugel in intestines, imitating sausage with some crackings. Of course, in Belarusian case, this would be rather pork crackings, something very non-kosher. But Jews had their own version of kishka, which was made not of potato. Sometimes yes, but most typically, it has been made from matzo meal, stewed vegetable, and goose or chicken fat. And it was considered one of the biggest delicacies. Most Jews were eating it only on Shabbat or during the biggest holidays. And kishka in America, in the United States, in the late 1950s, it was the biggest hit. Before the rock and roll age, there was a polka age, polka, which was the most popular dance in the middle of 20th century, and there was a famous hit, Who Stole the Kishka? Hit number one in the United States in something like 1958, 1959. Knishes. And now this is a dish with Slavonic genealogy, with Slavonic roots. We may say equally Belarusian and Lithuanian and Ukrainian, sorry. But I hope you know what knishes are. These are samples of them. And as I told you, some dishes in my book were brought to Belarus and Lithuania by Jews, and some, on the contrary, were borrowed by them and taken with them across the ocean, or to Israel, but mostly to the United States. And knishes is the most brilliant example of such path of the dish. Knishes are pies, small pies, with a filling of kasha, of stewed onions or stewed cabbage, or soft cheese, something like this, or boiled potato. and they were originally taken to the United States by Jewish immigrants as their simple home dish. But in New York especially, and in some other big American cities, they have started also to sell it on the streets, mainly in these Jewish quarters. And gradually it became so popular, especially in New York, that the popularity has grown far across the boundaries of Jewish quarters, especially in New York, as I told you, and even the New York accent, especially of Brighton and some other areas, as I picked up from various publications, is ironically called knishes, or perhaps the Yinglish, this version of English spoken by Jewish immigrants with heavy addition of words from Yiddish and Hebrew. And there is a film, documentary, If These Knishes Could Talk. It's a film about the New York accent. And this is famous Yonah Schimmel Knish Bakery in New York, which at this particular location exists since 1910, but at a previous location has been founded in late 19th century. It's the oldest Knish bakery in the United States, and it's so important that it is believed that at least since the end of the Second World War, none of the mayors of New York was elected unless he made a picture, or perhaps now it's a selfie. Previously, it was not a selfie, but a photographs taken by other people against the background of Yonah Schimmel Knish Bakery. If you do not send a message to a Jewish population of New York that you are a friend of Knish eaters, so to say, you have no chance to be elected a New York mayor. Was a popular belief, at least. And a famous American writer, Francis Scott Fitzgerald, in the end of 1920s, loved to come into the Jewish delicatessen of New York and ask for knishes. Sometimes he didn't even buy them, but simply he liked the word itself. For some reason, the sound of the very word knish made him laughing. It was a funny story. An American writer, Laura, I forgot her name at the moment, when her famous corner Knish bakery was closed, something like 2011 or something like this, she was so upset that she started to study history of knishes, and she made a journey even to Poland, to a town called Knishin, which historically was in the times of the Grand Duchy of Lithuania had it was a town with Belarusian population, now mostly assimilated. And he wrote a book about the history of knishes and the cultural meaning for the American Jews. And what is interesting, that people of Knishin, which has lost this tradition a long time ago, but they were so impressed by the visit of American lady who was interested in writing history of knishes, that they reintroduced this dish as a signature dish for Knishin, and now it's a local delicacy, and it's one of the tourist icon of this small town of Knishin. But oddly enough, the last king of Poland and Grand Duke of Lithuania, Sigismund August Jagiellon, who made Warsaw a capital, a common capital for Poland and Lithuania. Initially, his plans were to make Knishin a capital because it was his famous hunting place. And if he was more insistent in his intents, then today perhaps we would not have Warsaw as the capital, but Knishin. But unfortunately, for Knishin, and perhaps for the history of Knishin as well, it did not happen. But it's also a funny element to the story. Street sellers of knishes in New York back in the middle of 20th century were very famous. They were almost pop idols of the streets of New York. Sweet and sour meat or Essig flesh. Another common dish of Belarusian and Jewish cuisine. And with a rather mysterious story on Belarusian side. Until recently, I didn't even have a clue why the authors of selection of recipes in the middle of 20th century and Belarusian cuisine until the 1955-56 didn't have any official version. Simply, there was no such phenomenon as Belarusian cuisine, which has been recognized, publicized, studied, and only after the death of Stalin, when there was a partial thaw in cultural situation of the Soviet Union, the Council of Ministers of the USSR decided to publish a book called a collection of national recipes of various Soviet republics, and this was the first time when there was a book about Belarusian cuisine, official book. And among other dishes, there were sweet and sour meat, which was typical Jewish dish, and I suspect that in fact it was rather a true Jewish dish, but the authors of a book, of a chapter, Belarusian chapter of a book, many of them were in fact Jews, and they included this into the selection, not because of the importance of dish for typical Belarusians, but simply because it was close and dear to them. At least this was my hypothesis. But recently I have found on YouTube one of the fragments of weekly program of Belarusian TV, and it features sweet and sour meat as one of the dishes that the expedition of this program found in one of the Belarusian villages. So perhaps in fact, indeed, it penetrated the population of Belarus as well, but not on such a scale as draniki and some other dishes brought by the Jews. Let's go further. Bagels or baranki. I will now perhaps be more concise because I'd like to leave a room for questions as well. I hope all of you understand this, except for small notion that for Belarusians, the capital of baranki is Margony, the small town not far from Vilnius. And when there was no Lithuanian-Belarusian border, which is rather recent, Margony was the main supplier of bagels to the capital, to Vilnius. And in this town, almost half of families, Orthodox, Catholics, and Jews, were baking bagels, and this was a common business for all religious confession. Gefilte fish, one of the most famous dishes of Ashkenazi Jewish cuisine, which also became a Belarusian dish as well. People of Babruisk, which is sometimes ironically called the Jewish capital of Belarus, boast that they preserved this tradition even after the Jews left, preserved the tradition of preparing gefilte fish better than people in all other parts of Belarus. Gefilte fish is one of the dishes that for which this hostility between Litvaks and Hasidim is most noticeable. In 1960s, I think Marvin Herzog was the name of the person who discovered the so-called gefilte fish line. He discovered that true Litvaks, contrary to Hasidim, prepare gefilte fish and some other dishes like kugel and so on, using only salt and pepper, whereas Hasidim use a lot of other stuff like cinnamon, sugar, honey, raisins, dried apricots, and so on and so on. And symbolically, this reflects the psychological difference between Hasidim and Litvaks. Litvaks were more reserved, more rational, very restricted in the means that not only in cuisine but also in conversation, in expressing their emotions, whereas Hasidim were more hearty, more emotional, and so on. And there are many stories about this in the book, but I don't have enough time to tell all of them. One small notion that today, under the name of gefilte fish, in Israeli and in American, perhaps also in British supermarkets, is sold a dish that in traditional Litvak culture would rather be called gehakte fish. These are small round balls, fish balls, rather than whole fish, because gefilte means that the whole fish or its skin is filled in by this mince. But approximately in 1960s, Jewish home wives, same as others, became so lazy, or not lazy perhaps, or caring about time, that they almost completely stopped cooking this fish in whole skin, and they switched to this more simple way to prepare it. And now it's mostly they not even cook it, but simply buy in supermarket. Forsmak or gehackte herring. Most of today's Belarusians know the word forsmak, although originally it's not Litvak word. Today it's sold as a fish preserve in any corner shop in Belarus. In the times of Jewish shtetl, of Yiddishkeit, Litvak Jews would never call it forsmak. They simply didn't know the word. Most probably it has been borrowed in Soviet times from the common Soviet Jewish culture, mostly based on Odessa story, a famous port in the south of Ukraine, the subject of Russian attacks during this war that we are all now trying to survive. But the Litvak Jews called it simply gehackte herring, hacked herring. There was a proverb that Yiddish proverb that with one chicken you can feed 2 people, but with one herring you can feed 10. And this is exactly about gehackte herring, because when you are making gehackte herring or forsmak, you may add besides herring itself also apples, breadcrumbs, boiled eggs, and so on. And that's how from one herring you may prepare a dish that is enough to feed 10 people. And whereas chicken, you may simply boil it and share between two people, and that's all. And oddly enough, I discovered that for today's Jewish nostalgic tourists into, especially into Lithuania, but I pay much attention to tradition of Vilnius, former common capital for Belarus and Lithuania, maybe say this. So nostalgic Jewish tourists to Vilnius try to taste local versions of forsmak. It became, but only today, a nostalgic sign of Litvak cuisine for tourists. Although in the 100 years ago, it was not the situation. It was simply ordinary dish for every day with no symbolic meaning whatsoever. And also there is tradition to eat, Jewish tradition to eat forsmak on gehackte herring on special biscuits called kichel. And in particular, this tradition, perhaps best of all, preserved in South Africa, which, as I've been telling, is a domain of true Litvak cuisine. There is only one chapter dedicated to a drink in my book, namely to Zubrovka, and I believe you will have a chance to taste Zubrovka today. Zubrovka is simply an alcoholic drink. It's just vodka, strong spirit, with some bison grass added to it. Basically, it's a grass with a huge content of coumarin, which is, when in big quantities, it's slightly poisonous, and it's absolutely forbidden in the United States. Any stuff containing coumarin. So the version of Polish Zubrovka that is supplied to American market contains no Zubrovka at all. No this bison grass. Because it's absolute requirement of American Food and Drug Administration. The drink was invented by the hunters of Białowieża forest, which is now shared between Poland and Belarus. And it became especially popular because of the last Russian emperors, Alexander III, Nicholas II, loved to hunt bisons in Białowieża forest, and they invited many members of other royal families to these hunts. And after the hunt, they celebrated the trophies, including bisons. And this huge content of coumarin in bison grass makes it unpleasant for most other animals except for bisons, and they, because of the huge mass of their bodies, they can digest Zubrovka grass without any harm to them in big quantities. So they simply don't have competitors in animal world in this. But these professional hunters interpreted this in other way. They said that bisons owe their strength, in particular male bisons owe their strength to this famous grass. And that's why in the times of the last Russian emperors, Zubrovka as a drink became so popular. And oddly enough, it became also very popular with the Jews of Russian Empire, especially of Lithuania and Belarus. And I have here the covers of at least two books, Zalman Shner, the Shklov Jews, and Moshe Kulbak, Zelmenyaner. One book is dedicated to the life of Jews of Shklov in the east of Belarus, and Moshe Kulbak novel Zelmenyaner is one of the famous Jewish novels of 20th century, and it's dedicated to the last years of typical Jewish life in Soviet socialist Minsk, the capital of new socialist Belarus. And both of them celebrate the importance of Zubrovka for the Jews. You know that during Pesach, Passover, Jews have to have bitter herbs at the tables, maror, which celebrates the bitterness of slavery in Egypt. And this was one of the connotations that was given particularly by the Jews to this drink. And in a way, it became a national drink for the Jews shortly before this First World War and after this. And it was a famous drink of late Leonid Brezhnev, the General Secretary of Communist Party of USSR, who made his own contribution to the popularity of Zubrovka in USSR. But the sad story about Belarusian Zubrovka is that Belarusians completely forgotten, not Zubrovka itself, but the fact that the drink was invented in Belarus, in Białowieża forest, and today's political and cultural authorities of Belarus managed to lose all possible legal rights to Zubrovka to Russians and Poles in the same time, which is absolutely stupid, especially to the Russians, which had, except for the emperors who consumed Zubrovka during the Hans, had no other connections with Zubrovka historically. But this is one of the sad stories about the losses, and there are many questions, many stories of this in my book. And this is I included especially for the UK audience. this slide into presentation. This is an advertising poster of Zubrovka, made especially for the UK market some 10 years ago. I included this into another book of mine, Sakatala Bochechka, the barrel beveled, which was published 8 years ago. It's a book about the history of alcoholic drinks in Belarus. And this is a British artist view of the legendary Belarusian forest, full of mysterious animals, plants, which gives this unique touch to Zubrovka as a drink. Contrary to the Belarusian manufacturers, Polish manufacturers were absolutely fantastic in popularizing, in creating a market legend of Zubrovka. They invested tremendous efforts and budgets into creating the image of Zubrovka as a typical legendary Polish drink. Not only marketologists, but also artists, filmmakers, writers, and so on. Before this, in the middle of 19th century, William Somerset Maugham was one of the lovers of Zubrovka. He wrote several very warm words about Zubrovka. If you're interested, I will later give you a quotation.
Alies, I'm going to come in at this point because for the room, you may notice we did manage to acquire some of the bison grass. Zubrovka, unfortunately, available in the UK at the moment. We have this Polish Zubrovka produced.
Yes, because Poles managed to make Zubrovka strong alcohol brand #3 in the world, after Absolute and I don't remember what. It was the result of 25 plus years of incredible market and cultural effort.
Could you just clarify the poster? Which company, which source is advertising using the poster?
It was used by the sole agent or something like this for Zubrovka in the UK some 10 years ago.
Yes, but is it Polish Zubrovka?
Yes, it was a poster for Polish Zubrovka, but designed in the UK by UK artists.
Yes, Polish, not Belarus. Alice, we will have to draw.
But it's from the same. It's from the same Belarusian forest. It's shared by two countries.
Alice, are you hearing? We will have to draw quickly to a close because food has been prepared, and we don't want the soup to spoil because we are running a little over time. So could you maybe just summarize quickly and bring to a close in the next minute or two?
Yeah, and I hope you will have some questions.
A few questions, yes, if we can move quickly to that. Okay?
Yes, but I almost finished. I simply browse through the remaining slides so that you may simply read to have an impression of what the other chapters of the book are about. Великий дякую за увагу. Thank you for your attention. And if you have some questions, it's a high time to ask me. I'm at your disposal.
Chair Alan Flowers again. I always like to remember our people online, and we've got a really good online audience. So we're going to invite, first of all, if anybody online, I see Olena, Tamara, Carol would like to ask a question or make a comment. would you like to raise your hand or anybody online?
I
Oh, yeah.
have a question. Yeah, hi.
Please.
Just a very quick one. So, Alice, a couple of times you talked about the Litvak cuisine and you sort of juxtaposed it with the Hasidic Jews, right? And sort of in the differences between the two groups and their cuisines. Can you expand on that a little bit? I'm trying to understand sort of what differentiates the two, right? I understood the term Litvak to mean all Jews within the former Grand Duchy of Lithuania, but maybe my understanding of the term is incorrect, and maybe you can clarify that.
Oh, in the narrow sense, Litvaks were, from territorial point of view, they were inhabitants of Lithuania proper, so to say. Not the whole of Belarus, but the basin of Neumann River. It means both today's Lithuania and the Belarusian Neumann Basin part of territory. But in religious sense, they were followers of the famous Gaon of Vilnius, this more strict, more rational, more literary version of Judaism, whereas Hasidic Jews were and are more about spiritual understanding of the Bible, about songs, dances, good spirit, being joyful, eating sweet dishes, and so on. And this psychological difference between them was also reflected in cuisine, and especially in a number of dishes, 3 or 4 of which are especially this difference explained in my book. There is so-called gefilte fish line, which mostly coincides with the former boundaries of the Great Duchy of Lithuania, but it is not also, in fact, gefilte fish line. It was discovered on the gefilte fish, but it may also refer to kugel and to other dishes as well.
Yeah. Another chance for the online people. We've got Olya tomorrow. Anybody want to come in from online before we go to the room? All happy?
Well,
oh yeah, tomorrow.
Yes, if I may.
Tomorrow in Novograd speaking.
Yes, I am from Novograd, and I would like to thank Alies for his presentation. First of all, showing the connection between the two cuisines, between two peoples who lived side by side for centuries. And I would like to have more comments, not today, but probably another time, about what Belarusians have learned from the Jews. Because this is the question that bothers me in terms of cuisine and not only.
No, I mean, the book is, as I told you, is equally about what Jews has borrowed from Belarusians and Lithuanians. I mean, Lithuanian Polish nobility, because it's a third story, and it's also included into the book. And what, because when we talk about Mickiewicz or Kraszewski and other people like them who are also mentioned, they were not Belarusians, but they were living in today's Belarus, and they were also participating in this story of this exchange, cultural exchange. But I also talk about what Belarusian has borrowed, like draniki, like other grated potato dishes, like perhaps bagels, obwarzanki, baranki, and this influence is also so it was a mutually profitable exchange, so to say. And I don't think anybody has lost anything because of this exchange.
Okay, thank you.
I simply cannot, in such a short presentation, I cannot repeat all that I wrote in a rather thick book. I hope you managed to read it and understand better.
Now Yuri is going to introduce him himself and the role today, and then he has a question. Come in, Yuri.
Вітаю всіх, буду розмовляти на білоруській мові. Олесь, питання до вас. Де можна роздобути вашу... Дякую, во-первых, за сьогоднішню таку цікаву встречу. І де можна добити мені, моїм сябрам, таку цікаву книгу, яку ви зробили. Дякую за ваш труд. Будь ласка, скажіть, як її шукати і де її можна замовити в інтернеті, чи де там можна купити.
I don't know in which language I should reply, because most of the audience, I think, is English speaking. The question was about where is it possible to get a copy of my book. I believe that 2 or 3 copies should be present in the room. Alan, do you hear me?
Yes.
Because I was especially worried about the presence of a couple of copies, because I was even, frankly speaking, I was not even...
Unfortunately, I don't know where they've been left, and they're very rare in the UK at the moment.
But what about this that were promised by
Special treasurer one. And they did it.
Oh,
And it could be bought on Scarina Press.
this is Natalia, yes. We have actually, our treasurer, Natalia Reisden, brought her copy. So we do have it, and the
please pass it,
Scarina, yes, the Scarina Press online is offering purchase opportunities. The books will be available.
there is a couple of books that a couple of copies at the moment, but you can order.
So,
There is a
here's the
publisher,
actual
Gutenberg Press.
book you've been hearing about today.
You can order a copy from Gutenberg Press or from Scarina Press, agents in the UK. Now, at the moment, there are 2 or 3 copies physically in the UK, but you can get any quantity directly from Krakow anytime.
Online is saying.
And I'm sure you will enjoy this book, because one small detail, I was writing it for 17 years, 17, starting in...
Okay, well, we've been also
Thank you.
toasting, and I think some people in the room now may wish to recharge their glasses, because thanks to you, Alice, we've had Zubrovka in an Anglo Belarusian Society meeting, I think for the first time I can recall. Maybe our esteemed chair before me might remember that it's given for a very special occasion, and I have particularly, not only as chair of the Anglo Belarusian Society, but my thanks to Alice go back, because Alice, I was trying to work out if I know any Belarusian longer than I have known you, who is currently alive. Because I did meet some Belarusians before I met Alice first in November
1992.
1992. That is 33 years ago. And as Alice knows, we've done a lot of projects together, and we've kept in communication, not always as much. It was a bit difficult when Alice was in the last 2 years in prison for a brief period for his support of the Ukrainian people. And not only that, I know Alice and his work. I remember in 2006 bringing food to the square and assisting the protesters. So Alice has not only been a long friend, bravo, yes, you're getting applause for your great longevity, not only in bringing Belarusian culture to the world and the cuisine, but in the fight for a free Belarus, and now more recently in Ukraine. So I think for all of us here, I only bring up the personal note. I don't think any Belarusian alive I was linking up with and communicating with any earlier than that November 92. I actually met my first Belarusian contact in July, so that's a bit of the history of your current chair, and making it very special that Alies has put his time in, and then we've got this very special link with one of the great proponents of Belarusian history and culture to the worldwide, and it's just wonderful. We're broadcasting widely. This has been recorded on YouTube. We are now concluding the Anglo Belarusian Society meeting on 1st of February 2025, broadcasting this from Marian House in London as part of the Anglo Belarusian Society program of meetings. And we're now closing at this point. We will close the Zoom and the YouTube video, so that gets held and recorded. We're going to move to the food tasting here, which we're sorry that our friends in Canada and Belarus and elsewhere cannot quite join in the same way. If anybody wants a last comment or word, we will give a chance. We always do. We're a democratic society. But thank you particularly to our online guests. Cheers.
And last word from me is смачно їсти, bon appétit, бете авон.
Дякую.
Дякую вам. Дякую. Oh God, so.
Thank you everybody for listening, for joining the